"You are not who I thought," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper in the sudden deafening silence of the bridal chamber. Adana's world shattered. The joyous celebration, the culmination of years of hope and dreams, became a nightmare in a heartbeat. Accusations of witchcraft, of being a shape-shifting serpent, ripped through the air, tearing at the fabric of her being. Her own parents, their faces etched with horror and disbelief, recoiled from her as if she were a leper. The women who had danced with her, their laughter echoing in her ears just moments before, now spat on the ground she walked, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hatred. How could this be? Adana, who had always been known for her gentle nature, her unwavering kindness, her deep respect for the traditions of her people, was suddenly an abomination, a creature of darkness. Chinedu, the man she had loved, the man she had trusted with her heart and her future, had become her accuser, his words carrying the weight of the entire village. The village elders, their faces grim and unyielding, gathered to pass judgment. There was no trial, no chance to defend herself, no room for reason or compassion. Their minds, clouded by ancient fears and superstitions, were already made up. Adana was condemned, not for any crime she had committed, but for something she could not explain, something she did not understand. The humiliation was a brand seared into her soul. Stripped of her wedding finery, her head shaved, she was paraded through the village square, the joyous songs of her wedding replaced by the jeers and insults of her neighbors. Stones, heavy with their collective judgment, were thrown, each one a physical manifestation of the rejection that pierced her heart. Abandoned and ostracized, Adana was cast out of the village, banished to the desolate outskirts, a place of shadows and whispers, where the spirits of the forgotten roamed. Her heart, once brimming with love and hope, was now a desolate wasteland, echoing with the pain of betrayal and the agony of rejection. The familiar rhythms of village life, the laughter of children, the comforting sounds of women grinding millet, the evening songs around the fire, were now a distant, mocking memory. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. Adana survived on the fringes of existence, scavenging for food, finding shelter in the hollow of an ancient baobab tree. The physical hardships were immense, but they were nothing compared to the torment of her inner world. The questions gnawed at her. Why? How could this happen to her? What had she done to deserve such a fate? The pain of Chinedu's betrayal was a constant, festering wound. She remembered his smile, the warmth of his touch, the promises he had whispered under the starlit sky. Now those memories were poisoned, tainted by the venom of his accusations. She had given him her heart, her trust, her very being, and he had repaid her with cruelty and rejection. The rejection of her community was a different kind of pain, a deeper, more profound ache. These were the people she had grown up with, the people she had loved and trusted, the people who had shaped her into the woman she was. They had turned against her, their faces contorted with fear and hatred, their voices raised in condemnation. She was no longer one of them, no longer a part of the fabric of their lives. She was an outcast, a pariah, a ghost haunting the edges of their world. Loneliness became her constant companion. The silence of the wilderness was broken only by the rustling of leaves, the calls of nocturnal creatures, and the whispers of her own despair. She longed for the sound of a human voice, for the touch of a friendly hand, for the comfort of belonging. But there was no one. She was utterly alone, abandoned by everyone and everything she had ever known. The humiliation she had endured played on a loop in her mind, each replay more agonizing than the last. She remembered the jeers, the stones, the feeling of being stripped bare, not just physically but emotionally and spiritually. She had been reduced to nothing, her identity erased, her worth denied. Yet, even in the depths of her despair, a tiny spark of resilience flickered within Adana's heart. It was a faint ember, almost extinguished by the darkness, but it refused to die. It was the memory of her grandmother's words spoken long ago, "Even in the darkest night, the stars still shine." Slowly, painstakingly, Adana began to rebuild her life. She learned to survive in the wilderness, to find food and water, to protect herself from the elements and the wild animals. She discovered hidden strengths she never knew she had, a fierce determination to endure, to overcome, to prove them wrong. She started to question the traditions that had condemned her, the beliefs that had turned her own people against her. Were they truly just? Were they truly wise? Or were they simply a reflection of fear and ignorance, passed down through generations, unquestioned and unchallenged? Adana's exile became a journey of self-discovery. She learned to listen to the whispers of the wind, the secrets of the earth, the ancient wisdom that resonated in the silence of the wilderness. She found solace in the beauty of the natural world, in the rhythm of the changing seasons, in the quiet strength of the ancient trees. One day, a wandering trader stumbled upon Adana's solitary existence. He was wary at first, drawn in by rumors, but he saw not a monster, but a woman of quiet dignity and resilience, a woman who had suffered greatly but whose spirit remained unbroken. He listened to her story, his eyes filled with compassion and understanding. The trader, whose name was Obi, became Adana's lifeline. He brought her supplies, shared news of the outside world, and offered her a glimpse of hope. He told her of other villages, other communities where traditions were not so rigid, where people were more accepting of those who were different. Obi's kindness sparked a new dream within Adana, the dream of finding a place where she could belong, a place where she could be accepted for who she was, not for what she was accused of being. It was a long and arduous journey, fraught with challenges and uncertainties, but Adana was no longer the frightened, broken girl who had been cast out of her village. She was a survivor, a warrior, a woman who had stared into the abyss and emerged stronger, more determined than ever. Years passed. Adana traveled far and wide, encountering different people, learning new ways of life and slowly, painstakingly, piecing together a new identity for herself. She never forgot the pain of her past, but she refused to let it define her. She chose to focus on the future, on the possibility of finding a place where she could finally find peace and belonging. Then one day she heard whispers of a gathering, a convergence of different tribes and communities, a place where new ideas were being shared and old traditions were being questioned. It was a place of hope, a place of change, a place where Adana felt, for the first time in many years, a flicker of recognition. She went to the gathering, her heart pounding with a mixture of trepidation and excitement. And there, amidst the vibrant tapestry of different cultures and beliefs, she found them, a group of women who had also been cast out, ostracized and rejected by their own communities. Women who had been accused of witchcraft, of being possessed by evil spirits, of defying the ancient ways. These women, like Adana, had suffered greatly, but they had also found the strength to survive, to rebuild their lives, and to create a new community, a community based on acceptance, understanding, and mutual support. They welcomed Adana with open arms, their faces filled with compassion and solidarity. In this new community, Adana finally found a place where she belonged. She was no longer an outcast, a pariah, a ghost. She was one of them, a sister, a survivor, a woman who had found her voice and her strength in the face of unimaginable adversity. And then the shocking twist. One evening, as Adana sat with her new sisters, sharing stories and laughter, an old woman, her eyes filled with a strange sadness, approached her. "Do you remember Chinidu?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Adana's heart clenched. The name, which she had tried so hard to forget, brought a wave of pain and bitterness. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I remember him." The old woman sighed. "He is dead," she said. "He died many years ago, consumed by guilt and madness. But before he died, he confessed the truth about your wedding night." Adana stared at her, her mind reeling. "What truth?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "He was not repulsed by you," the old woman said. "He was terrified of himself. You see, Chinidu carried a secret he had kept hidden from everyone, even himself. He was born with a mark, a small, almost invisible marking on his lower back, a marking that, according to the ancient legends, identified him as one chosen by the river spirits. He believed that if anyone, especially a woman, discovered this mark, he would lose his manhood, his strength, his very soul." The old woman continued, "On your wedding night, in his fear and panic, he projected his own perceived monstrousness onto you, accusing you of being a spirit snake, to deflect from his own perceived affliction. He couldn't bear the thought of you or anyone knowing his secret. His betrayal wasn't about you, Adana, it was about his own deep-seated fear and self-loathing." Adana was stunned. The revelation was like a thunderbolt, illuminating the darkness of her past with a harsh, unforeseen light. Chinidu's betrayal, the act that had shattered her life, was not a reflection of her own worthlessness, but a desperate act of self-preservation, fueled by fear and superstition. The humiliation, the rejection, the abandonment, it was all based on a lie, a terrible, tragic misunderstanding. The old woman added, "The elders knew of this mark, the prophecy. They were afraid of his power, of what he might become. They used your accusation as an excuse to banish you both, you to silence him, and you to remove any perceived threat to their established order." In that moment, Adana understood. She understood the true nature of the betrayal she had suffered, the depth of Chinidu's fear, and the insidious power of the traditions that had condemned her. And strangely, amidst the pain, she felt a flicker of something else. Not forgiveness perhaps, but a profound sense of release. The burden of guilt and shame she had carried for so long began to lift, replaced by a newfound understanding and a quiet sense of peace. Adana's journey was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. She had been betrayed, rejected, abandoned, and humiliated in the most brutal way imaginable. She had lost everything, but she had also found something: herself. She had learned that even in the darkest of times, hope can survive, that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, the human spirit can endure, and that even when we are cast out and rejected, we can find the strength to create our own belonging. And so, Adana's story became a legend, a tale whispered around campfires, a reminder that true strength lies not in conforming to the expectations of others, but in embracing our own truth, in finding our own path, and in creating our own community, a community built on love, acceptance, and the unwavering belief in the inherent worth of every human being.